Hello, Jeff.
Well, hello. Greetings from sunny Louisiana, United States. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you, Dr. Long?
Doing great. And how about yourself?
Doing good. It's nighttime over in Glasgow, in Scotland. And
Excellent.
I had the privilege to interview one of your patients, or at least the person that you looked at, and because she had a near-death experience that is very well known and that you have featured on your website. And this is how this went viral over the internet. I'm talking of Anita Moorjani.
Oh, of course.
And
Yeah, one of the most fantastic near-death experiences ever shared with us, and we have over 3,000.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a website, NDERF, that you founded years ago. How many years ago?
Yeah, it's been about 12 years ago. We got it up in 1998, and so it's been actually it's 14 years ago.
And what's really interesting about you is that you're a physician from Louisiana, and you work with cancer patients, and you got interested about those near-death experience (NDEs), and
Right.
you've got all those NDEs experience that you have on your website, and you have now this book called Evidence of the Afterlife. So we're
That
going
is
to talk of
correct. Yeah,
NDEs.
yeah, it's been an adventure all the way along.
Yeah. Yeah. What got you into this? What was the moment where your scientific mind went like, yeah, okay, I might have to reconsider what I have learned for many years?
That's a good question. That goes back to when I was in my residency training program. My medical specialty is radiation oncology, the use of radiation to treat cancer. But back many, many years ago, I was reading looking for a cancer-related article in one of the most prestigious medical journals of the world, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it was totally by accident that I found an article that had the term near-death experience in it. Now, I'd never heard that term before. This was in the early 80s, and I stopped and I was puzzled. And so I went ahead and read the article and was fascinated immediately. Remember thinking, how can somebody who's unconscious or clinically dead have a lucid, organized experience, and how can these experiences be so similar around the world? I said, why isn't more people doing research on this fascinating topic? So immediately I was fascinated, and between my medical studies, tried to learn as much as I could in the ensuing years. But I kept my fascination until many years later when I finally had the time that I could set up the NDERF.org website and start learning about near-death experience that way.
So you started collecting stories around the world. How did you know, and how did you knew those were real near-death experiences?
Sure. As a scientist and a physician, I know that it's a basic tenet of science. What is real is consistently observed. So I knew when I set up the website and had the questionnaire that if I was going to see these types of patterns over and over in near-death experiences, that would convince me that these near-death experiences are, in a word, real. And very quickly I learned, no question about it, we saw those patterns over and over. Near-death experiences very quickly convinced me of their reality by that consistent pattern.
And what are those?
Well, while no two near-death experiences are the same, when you study as many as I have, you see what other researchers have observed, and that is very often there's, of course, that traumatic, life-threatening event. These people are so physically compromised that they're unconscious, or they may be actually dead with no spontaneous heartbeat or respiration. But at that time, they shouldn't have any memory they do, and the typical near-death experience could include, first of all, an out-of-body experience. Consciousness separates from the body. Their consciousness may rise over their body, and from that vantage point, they may see their lifeless body and even often vividly describe their own frantic resuscitation efforts. And then following that, they may go through a tunnel, variably described. There's often a light at the end of the tunnel. And then they may enter an unearthly, and some people call them heavenly, realms because they're so beautiful. Colors are fantastic, beautiful scenery, unlike anything they've ever seen. They may have a life review at that time. They may meet people that they've known on Earth that died. These are joyous reunions. They may then reach what's called a boundary near the end of their experience. They're often feeling intensely positive emotions at this time. And then very often a decision is made about returning to their earthly body, and then boom, they return to life. They have to recover from what nearly killed them. And then after they do, they have that fantastic near-death experience to share.
Is it always a fantastic experience?
Not always. Near-death experiences range the spectrum. They can be very simple experiences where there's simply consciousness apart from the body, looking at themselves down their lifeless body. They may have intensely positive feelings. It could be fairly simple in the sense that there aren't a lot of elements of the experience. Other near-death experiences are fantastically more detailed, and everything in between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what are how do you make this a scientific case? How do you actually bring some evidences to this?
Sure. First of all, as a physician, I review every single near-death experience account and make sure that I'm convinced that what they're describing really was a life-threatening event. And that's helpful to have that medical background, because I can get a sense for the circumstances that they were in, and it helps corroborate their impression that they were unconscious or clinically dead. So first of all, we have that foundation. Second thing, scientifically, I know the trick is to ask in any survey redundant questions. In other words, you're asking the same question, but in a slightly different fashion, and you can compare how they respond. And the correlation between these types of redundant questions in the surveys that we run are extremely high. Further validation to me that these people are indeed answering these questions accurately. And then finally, you have the fact that what they're describing is very, very consistent. Very often they describe having information they could not possibly have known. They may describe a life review where they saw events from their early childhood that they later corroborated. They may describe what they see in that out-of-body experience, and then coming back years later or days later or months later and finding out that what they saw was indeed absolutely accurate, even if they're, for example, having a viewpoint of what things look like in the tops of tall buildings around, for example, the scene of an auto accident. So there's many, many different ways that you can draw to bear what you would scientifically call falsification of the experience. You look for what doesn't add up, what doesn't, could possibly suggest that it's not real. And at the end of the day, after having done that so many times, you're left with the fact that these experiences are absolutely real.
Mm-hmm. And in the case of Anita Moorjani, you actually asked her medical records, and you looked at them and have them on file?
Actually, she did share a few medical records, and coupled with some, her interview with her, she was, even by a cancer doctor's perspective, breathtakingly close to death. I mean, she was really, very few people have any chance of pulling out after getting that close to death that she did. So she was, I mean, we see the whole spectrum in near-death experiences of people that, are anywhere from, simple unconsciousness to someone who's just got organ shut down like Anita and very, very nearly died. And so Anita, even by my standards, of seeing many, many near-death experiences describing a variety of ways that get close to death, was profoundly close to death and would have died very quickly had she not probably had her experience and had what happened.
Mm-hmm. And what does that? The name of your book is Evidence of the Afterlife. Right. So what are some of those things that we can expect from afterlife?
Oh, absolutely.
Can we expect that same thing, those same experiences of no time, full awareness, etc.?
I think some of the strongest evidence about what happens when we die are these so-called shared near-death experiences, where there's a sudden life-threatening event, and then there's two or more people that literally share their experience. They're together, they can talk with their consciousness apart from the body, and they may even enter these unearthly realms interacting. And so very often in these experiences, one person, if you will, goes on and doesn't return to life, doesn't return to their earthly body, and yet the other person does. So that is some of the strongest evidence that I'm aware of, that the descriptions of what people describe in near-death experiences does really seem to be that initial path of permanent, irreversible death. And what a remarkable afterlife that suggests. That's why my book is so full of hope and has been so profoundly reassuring to so many people. First and foremost, which I think is manifestly evidence from my own research and the research of others, absolutely, there is life after death. There is a wonderful life after death, and it is for all of us. But above and beyond that, it's what that life is like at that afterlife, free of pain and suffering, intensely feelings of joy, peace, and love, that awareness that we're all connection, that awareness that love rules the universe, that place of all knowing, that place of all acceptance, profound beyond anything we can even imagine in our earthly lives. And yet there it is, our heritage for each and every one of us.
Mm. It's amazing to hear about shared near-death experience, and this is something I don't think we hear much about in the mainstream, even more so, but even on the internet. What are some of the conditions that makes this possible?
Yeah, shared near-death experiences, you don't hear about them much because they're relatively rare. It's
Okay.
very unusual where two people have a simultaneous life-threatening event, such as a bad car accident, and
Okay.
then, one person comes back and shares this. Shortly after my book was published, we had yet another shared near-death experience, and I might just give it as an example. There was a gentleman driving with his fiancée, terrible auto accident, and so they were both unconscious as a result of the physical trauma of the accident that they suffered. But all of a sudden, the two of them found themselves holding hands over the car, looking down at their own physical bodies down below. And they were able to communicate and talk and realize that they'd been in a very serious accident, and that it was, they were both unconscious, and that they were both having a fantastic experience together. So they were actually holding hands as they ascended up, and they went higher and higher into some unearthly realms. And there they met a small group of other beings who told them what they already knew. You've been in a severe auto accident, and communicated to them that the gentleman needed to return to his earthly body, but that the lady had been so severely injured in the auto accident that she was not going to be able to return. And these beings reached out and took the two hands which they were still holding together and separated them. And the lady went with them forward, with the beings, and the gentleman returned to his earthly body. And then only after some time he came to consciousness. But you can imagine the horror moment he comes to consciousness, knowing exactly what happened. He'd been in an auto accident, and he knew full well instantly on awaken, without even looking around or checking, his fiancée had died because he was a part of that experience.
Mm. How do you call those experiences where there is a person on the deathbed, or they're transitioning, and other people in the room feel that and feel the moment they passed away, or they're having this experience? Are these also considered shared near-death experience or not?
Yeah, that's a good point. The term where somebody is dying and other people in the room become aware of the time that they pass through a whole variety of mechanisms, or even the experience of the dying person being aware of deceased loved ones around them, or if you will, spiritual beings, or having intense awareness of love and peace. These are all globally known as deathbed visions, is the term. And if somebody else is around the person dying and they have that experience, those aren't shared near-death experiences, but that's a more global term, applies to those shared death experiences. So that's what. And shared death experiences, of course, we have a lot more of them. As you just mentioned, and you're absolutely correct, at the time someone is dying, and this doesn't happen very often, but it can, even if there's one and there's often a small group there, they may suddenly become aware or even see an essence of that person parting. A light is often described as separating from the physical body at the moment of death. They often describe right at that moment intense positive senses of feelings, joy, peace, oneness, and it's just an amazing experience. What should be that the end to a dying process, that last horrific moment, suddenly becomes a beautiful, transcendent moment for everybody that's in the room experiencing that, and they realize that the soul's departed, that there is an afterlife, and it's incredibly reassuring, as you can imagine, for people that have those types of experiences.
People describe that it's coming out of the head like that sometimes. Did you have that?
They absolutely do. Coming out of the head is a common description about where the light or the essence or something immaterial seems to separate, but I've seen it described from really any part of the body or the entire body. So it can seem that's true for what they describe for around the time of near-death experiences. So it seems to be head is the most common, chest probably second most common, but it can the visualizations of that essence, if you will, soul, if you will, departing, can occur anywhere, or it may not be observed departing.
Dr. Wayne Dyer today was on stage with Anita Moorjani and was explaining one of his stories with feeling his mom and being jolted. He lost his mom I think not so long ago, and he felt jolted. Do you also see that in those cases? How do you explain this when you're in a total different room or country, that you feel that your loved one all of a sudden either giving you a big hug or you feel like a strong presence?
Oh, that is very, very common. We actually, in addition to our near-death experience website, we have a whole website devoted to after-death communication. So we have literally hundreds of these types of experiences. They're not rare at all. The most common type that they occur is somewhat like Wayne Dyer described, and that's right at the moment of death. We have many experiences where at the moment of death, even if they didn't know the other person was dying or even was ill or their life was in jeopardy, or even if they're hundreds or even thousands of miles apart, they can have that awareness. It can be a jolt. They can actually see the person. They can actually hear the person. There's a whole spectrum of experiences that can occur right at that moment. Now, if it's at night, one thing that's very interesting is they'll typically look at the clock and say, wow, what happened? What's going on here? And then if the person, was pronounced dead in a hospital or some other institution, you have that timestamp and you can correlate the time of their experience with the time of declarative death. And it is astounding how frequent that is. So
the accuracy,
yeah, and that's common. And that is a good example of a shared death experience, because it's occurring right up there, basically sharing a moment or an awareness that someone else has died right at that moment. And these can be beautiful experiences. They can see the person, hear the person who's died, and essentially always these are messages of profound peace and just awareness that they died, and if you will, a very loving final goodbye.
I wonder when it happens to at a younger age, to let's say a kid that is 5, 6, 7 years old or what have you, that loses somebody important, that if they can be actually shocked by such an experience and then totally shut down.
It's interesting. We have many people who describe these shared death experiences, or if you will, after-death communications occurring at the time of the death. Many of them are children. It doesn't really seem to be traumatic, because don't get, gosh, you and I and many of your viewers may say, isn't that like a ghostly or frightening or sudden or scary? It really isn't. Very often you feel, like is described in near-death experiences, that great sense of peace, that great sense of love. You feel that there's something very good happening. And then essentially always in after-death communications, it's not frightening or startling. You immediately become, or if there is, it's extremely brief, but they feel the sense, that loving presence, that joy of being there, that satisfaction, that once in a lifetime experience where they're able to say goodbye one more time. So even for children, these experiences are set up so that they have those associated positive emotions, so that they almost never are frightening.
Well, unless their surrounding is not understanding all this, and this was the problem years and years ago also with adults. But if you're around others that think you're crazy because you've seen such a thing, you can actually, I think, very much withdraw from it. And thank God for websites like yours, and that you step up early in the process. And there is now many books about it and testimonials, so people can free themselves up, thanks to Raymond Moody as well for his really, really early pioneering book. But I could see how a kid could definitely shut down after a whole spiritual realm because of that. Unfortunately, because he might not be understood by his own parents. So the parents have such a big role to play too.
Right. That is such an excellent point. Parents, whenever, and this goes for everybody, whenever you encounter someone, a child or anybody else that describes these remarkable spiritual experiences, because they may be unfamiliar to the parent or their friends or family or other people, it's tragic, and we still hear a lot about this, about people who tried to share their experience. They were ridiculed. They were told it was a dream. People that have these experiences almost invariably know that something real happened. They know darn good and well what dreams are, and they know what they experience, and they're totally different things. So as a result of that, it's very, very disheartening for people that know that they've had a profoundly important experience in their life, and it's hard for people to believe that they share with. And you're right. All the websites, all the books that have come out, all the remarkable stories that have been told have been a huge game changer. I will tell you, from doing this for over 14 years, early on we saw so much more of that, so much more people that had a hard time being believed, that were, if you will, shut down. And yes, they were. Well, today, with the internet, with people aware of how common these experiences are and aware that they're real, we're seeing much less of that. You see much less healthcare team members telling people that your experience wasn't real. You see much less people, friends, people telling them that could not possibly have happened. We know darn good and well that they happened as researchers. We have the evidence to not only prove that they happened, but they're real experiences, and that has been enormously helpful in the public accepting these experiences. People are these and age, the substantial majority of people know, for example, about near-death experiences and these types of experiences, and they're much more accepting of them than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah. In Europe, because now I'm touring around Europe and interviewing people, unless I'm doing Skype like those, but I'm noticing that near-death experiences stories are huge. There's big events happening here in France, thanks to Sonia, that was S17 Production, is creating big events. And there is, I'm noticing over in Holland with the doctor... the cardiologue and in France that now within hospitals there is a service, there's a department to help the patients report those kind of events and help them to walk towards death, to reassure them so that they can see those videos or testimonials of NDEs. Do you also see that in the US? How is that evolving around you?
Yeah. Very good question. In the last 10 years, there's been a huge amount of change in the hospital settings in the United States, too. I recently was invited to go up to Wisconsin here in the United States and talk at one of the largest hospitals in Milwaukee at their medical grand rounds, which is almost always reserved for items of medical information. But there I talked about my book, Evidence of the Afterlife and Near-Death Experiences. The auditorium, which was huge, was so packed with people interested in the talk. There were people sitting in the aisles. I felt bad about that. But here was like scores and scores and scores of doctors as far as the eye could see, and here I am sharing my experience. But to my astonishment, they loved it. To my astonishment, the feedback, and they actually sent me the feedback from my talk that they provided anonymously afterwards, and it was overwhelmingly positive. That I don't think would have happened 10 years ago. So I think now more than ever, due to the incredible efforts of all the people you've mentioned, and the media, and just a lot of people's internet, and a lot of people having awareness, there's more acceptance even among healthcare professionals than was ever possible before. So I think we're really there's really a game changer going on. You bet. I think there's a clear change. People are now, and Anita's a good example. I mean, just people that have that courage to go out and share their incredible and powerful stories with the world are really helping people, I think, now more than ever before, understand these experiences are real. It's helping open people up to share these experiences, and it seems to be almost snowballing in terms of public acceptance of this, and I sure hope that trend continues. I suspect it will.
And I feel, and that's what I said to my latest interview yesterday with Anita in person, which I finally met in person here in Glasgow, because our previous interviews were over Skype, and she was exactly the same, and this beautiful energy, and it was amazing. But I was sharing with her how even though for people like me that haven't lived near-death experiences, we can feel it, and it's transformative just reading about those and hearing about them, and it's wonderful. It's really there is something that shifts within us just hearing about it and being open, of course, to just hearing, and then it's okay. You can approve, not approve. Your mind can catch up later.
When you talk to a near-death experiencer, they may kind of be hesitant or somewhat tentative when they talk about the events that led up to them dying or their recovery. But when they start talking about their experience, that near-death experience, when it comes to that part of the story, they sit up straighter, eyes get wider, they seem to have a lot more confidence. You know, out of everything that happened around that story, that's the most real, significant, and important to them. You see that very consistently with near-death experiencers. You know, it's one more of those kind of subtle things that helps validate for me these near-death experiences are absolutely, just like they're saying, the real thing.
Yeah, and we get it, and we feel it, and it's we're impacted by it too.
Oh, and no question about that. I don't know how you can hear a near-death experiencer and not be affected. I mean, good gosh. I mean, it's one thing to hear someone, talk about some, who knows what they did yesterday in the store, but a near-death experience, that's different.
That's juicy. I love it. Oh my God, I love it. I think it's my favorite topic right now to cover.
It's almost like an art in itself. I mean, they're excited, they're interested. In fact, near-death experiencers, if they're talking to someone who's interested and they know it, gosh, I mean, that's exciting.
You've got the full thing. I know. Oh my goodness. And they start speaking of unconditional love and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And we hear that over and over. And that's part of the beauty of this. I mean, the near-death experiencers, even after hearing from over 3,000 of them in my research, I will say, even as a seasoned researcher, I still am inspired. I still, love it. I still appreciate everybody that shares with me. And it's just a never-ending source of joy to have these messages I hear. I never get tired of it, and that's after 3,000. So,
Beautiful. So,
yeah.
so anybody watching that had a near-death experience from anywhere around the world, I welcome you to go to your website NDERF.org, so they can fill up the questionnaire and submit also their stories, and if they want to read your book, it's Evidence of the Afterlife.
Right. Yeah, that's good. We're still accepting. We have a lot of near-death experiences, but your point's well made. Every near-death experience is important and significant, and no two are the same. And we're still learning from our research. We have a relatively new survey up where we ask questions, if you will, about the spiritual content of near-death experiences. So now more than ever, we're learning some of those very important things, like you were just saying, that sense of unconditional love. We're drilling down to find out more about that, asking questions about that. We're trying to sort of help people understand that so that we can share that back with the world. In my next book, and it's going to be exciting.
The life lessons in near-death experience are huge, as far as the awareness, the total awareness, the time, the instant healing, all of it is so precious for our life right now. So that's why when I'm interviewing somebody that had those near-death experience, I keep on repeating, but please check out what you can learn in your own life right now and how you can apply it. Because as Anita shared, all the fears that she had and that she realized, it was a realization that what led her to have this cancer was this life full of fears. And then when she realized that, gone, up, I go back into my body, a few days later, up, healed.
Just amazing, isn't it? I hope everyone has a chance to read her book. It is just absolutely fantastic.
Dying to be me.
Yeah, and the paradox of Anita's message, which is absolutely true, is that near-death experiences have less to do with death and more to do about life, more to do about things that we all need to know, things that we can, help us live our lives more confidently, help us understand we don't need to fear death, help us understand that we can live our life apart from the fears that have held us back from being who we really are. Whereas in the words of Anita, remember your magnificence. I really love that. And it's certainly the near-death experiences and the messages we see so consistently, profound messages for all of us to live our lives each and every day.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Long, for this this beautiful interview and this clarity that you have and your passion, and for going beyond what you were instructed to do, to go beyond that, to pioneer and to share with the world in a much bigger realm now.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate great interview. Thank you so much.
You're
and
welcome.
It's just a real delight to share what I know about near-death experiences. Thank you again.
Thank you.